guy called Neil Atkins, who still DJs a little bit today, and he's still a friend of mine, and another guy called Taffy. They were the kind of two predominant DJs of this little circle of characters. So, and as I said, they were phenomenal DJs. Neil particularly was he was a real connoisseur of his music. He evolved into more of a jazzy sound, and he was a great influence, to be honest with you. Fantastic, a fantastic character and a great music man. And, for many years when we were doing the Chuff parties and the Moneypennies events, he would be one of the DJs that would play the alternative area. So we always had two rooms, particularly at Chuff. A little bit later at Moneypennies when the club created a second room. But, he was always on our list of DJs that would play, again, because he was just such a... his music was just, again, far-reaching in terms of the sounds and his influences.
And that's that's important because you have a plethora of different sound, and I knew that about your club. It wasn't just based on house music. You had different styles going on in two rooms that I remember. But taking us from the river side of it, and of course, the success begins step by step. People don't realize the amount of years that go into it. They don't realize the amount of years that go into it. They don't realize the backstory as well that you're dealing with. So I know if you're making that kind of money for these promoters, the light bulbs are going, you know what? We can do this ourselves.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, I suppose at that particular time, the events that we were putting on were more of an extension to our social life, really. It wasn't necessarily it wasn't necessarily driven totally by the financial gain, because we had our own business that was doing reasonably okay. But yes, when we saw the opportunity for when we were selling out the boat trips very, very quickly, we were soon sort of onto the idea of, hang on a minute, we need to look at bigger venues and need to look at establishing that concept in a slightly different manner, other than just simply a little bit of fun on the River Severn. So yes, absolutely.
Well, then I guess Chuff's become part of the secondary part to what is later starting Miss Moneypennies. When you guys ventured to the idea of actually creating this new brand off the Chuff.
Okay, well, I mean, I suppose a little bit of context about Chuff and how that evolved. I mean, from the riverboat, which was, again, as I said, an extension to our social life, we realised that there was a network of people that were around us. There was people from various parts of the country that were coming to these events, and they became key to how we established an audience, or a bigger audience, so that there would be people that would bring people from Coventry, which was relatively close, Northampton, Nottingham, Sheffield, Leeds, so all of a sudden Manchester. So all of a sudden there was little pockets of people that were starting to kind of connect with what we were doing, and consequently we had to look for bigger venues. But what we realised, I think, as a result of what was going on in the rave scene, so we were quite lucky because we had an ongoing situation which was quite easy for us to quite easily be able to not only get feedback, the kids that were going to the raves and getting what was negative and positive, but also we could come up with concepts that were slightly different to what was going on in the rave scene. And plus we were avid club people anyway, so we were not only doing the holiday destinations, and as particularly initially was Greece, so we were sort of seeing what was going on in these parts, and a little bit later, so I suppose the late 80s would have been Ibiza. So we were seeing that there was something that could be developed that was a little bit more sophisticated, I suppose, than what was being offered by the rave scene, which fundamentally, as I said, became more and more a money making machine. So we kind of took a step back from what these guys were doing, and I suppose evaluated what the mistakes they were making, and tried to develop something as a result of the influences that we gained from the club experiences we had, and tried to amalgamate that into the concept that became Chuff, which was, and yes, we used some of the principles that were associated with the rave scene. So, for example, the early Chuffs, we would try and source really interesting venues. So there would be country hotels or stately homes, schools we use. So lots of interesting venues that wouldn't even have been considered by the rave organisers, which were just looking for massive fields so they could just get as many people in as they possibly could. So we held back on numbers and tried to create within an environment that was a little bit interesting, and also, I suppose, because we were in the front line in terms of having a shop, handpicked the type of people that we wanted to go to the events, and that allowed us to take advantage of a scene that was, I suppose, in some respects, kind of losing its way because it was fundamentally run as a money-making exercise. Whereas, as I said, our sort of initial drive wasn't to make money; it was more to create an ideal. And yes, it did become a business, absolutely. But the initial stages was to look at the mistakes that were being made through the rave scene and try to create something that was a little bit more focused and allow that to evolve.
Where did you get the name Chuff?
Okay, that's an interesting story because as I said, the initial ones were on a boat, and once we got to the point where we were actively promoting these events, we got a guy to do a graphic for us, and he drew a little kid's boat and a funnel, and coming out of the funnel was Chuff. So that became the name.
So basically, on the actual the person that created the visual, he wrote Chuff, and people just locked onto that.
No, we thought this was a great name. Let's call the parties Chuff parties.
This is what I mean. You can't make this stuff up. This is what makes it so fantastic. And let me tell you, because I always thought Chuff was like some sort of female thing, like they look really pretty. I'm thinking back in the day, I don't know what and now you're telling me because, oh my God. Let me tell you why I say that. It just felt like it was speaking to women more so than like it wasn't a male-dominated sounding brand. It was more like very, let's go to the Chuff. It's like, oh, sounds so bushy,
Well, I mean, ironically, there is some truth in that because I think, again, possibly because of our background, because, we were brought up in a very diverse area, and consequently, particularly when Chuff started becoming popular, we certainly tried to incorporate that diversity. So there was always a big gay following for it, and also it was very female friendly because, again, I suppose looking at the mistakes that were being made by the bigger organisations was that they didn't really give that service or that attention to detail. So, we ensured that people were safe and people were, when they came to our environment, they were looked after. They were, the service was of a high standard. And as a result of that, I think it did not only, it it certainly attracted a gay audience, and it certainly attracted a female audience. And as a result of the female audience, the men followed. so it was, and again, was it planned up to? I don't even think it was planned. It just kind of happened that way, and it was happened that way because of the negativity that was going on in other areas of the industry at the time. So we kind of, I suppose, we spotlighted that and made that our business to ensure that the people that did come to our events did feel safe, and allowed them to enjoy the experience.
Jim, if you didn't do the Chuff or the boutique or any of this road, what would you have been doing as a profession now?
That's a really interesting question. I don't know, to be honest with you. I mean, I do. I mean, presently I do some teaching, so I probably would have fallen into that line. When we had the shop, most of the, particularly the early days of the shop, most of the business would take place Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So I did a part-time English degree while we had the shop, which I suppose, I felt when I left school I'd never fulfilled my academic potential. I don't think I've ever have, but I was always interested in reading and always interested in literature. So I did a part-time degree at what's now become Birmingham City University. It was at the time Birmingham Polytechnic. So I used to go twice a week to study. So,
that's why I had to ask, because I was wondering, I'm saying, for someone that speaks so posh, so should we be ringing out Professor Ryan instead of Jim?
I don't know. Maybe if you were aware of accents, you wouldn't call me that posh. I don't receive pronunciation by any stretch of the imagination. My accent is probably a little bit of a tinge of Irish with Birmingham intermingled.
On the road to success, now Moneypennies begins. The first parties start us. Let's talk about where the first parties begin and where this takes you in the journey.
Okay, so I mean, alongside this, I was evolving as a DJ. So, I mean, there was a lot of things going on in my life at that time, and so the Chuff party certainly gave me a platform, and I started getting bookings, and as a result of that, and Chuff evolved, and as I said, it became quite a phenomenon, and it was certainly embraced by the dance music press. They would come to the events, and it became a bit of a national. It was a national phenomenon. It wasn't just a Birmingham-based situation. So we got to the point where we realised that this is getting too much to handle, and we were quite precious about it. We didn't really want to. We didn't really want to make Chuff into a weekly event. And obviously at the time, so this would have been 1992, 93. So, the club scene was starting to develop. And, we used to go to the Hacienda regularly. We used to go to, and obviously we did Chuff in Venus, Venus, which I think you may have DJ'd there in Nottingham. The Milk Bar, we became friends with Nicky Holloway. And so the Balearic scene, as it became known, was kind of evolving as well at the same time. So we saw the club scene. So the rave scene sort of was moving into the club. So we saw that happening, and were contributing to it to a certain extent by bringing the Chuff thing into a club, as well as doing the one-off parties. So that kind of gave us the impetus to develop the Chuff, to develop something other than Chuff into a club environment. And we didn't really want to, as I said, we wanted to maintain this sort of one-off concept that Chuff had become. And 1992, Christmas 92, we did an event in a club in Birmingham, and Christmas Eve, I think it was, and there was ourselves and the Wobble Guys, which was Phil Gifford's brand in Birmingham, and we did a one-off Christmas Eve event in Bonds, which eventually became the home of Miss Moneypennies, and I think Gordon Kay and John of the Please Women DJ'd for us on this particular occasion, and it was a good event, great event. And then a little bit later, the Q Club opened, and we did the first. I don't know whether you've ever heard of the Q Club. It was, I suppose, to a certain extent, one of the most iconic clubs in Birmingham, and we did the first 4 events in the Q Club, but it wasn't branded Chuff Chuff or Moneypennies. It was branded the Silver Slipper, and it was this was a big old.
I don't remember that Q Club thing. That's kind of great to me.
Yes, we did 4 events, and first 2 were roadblocks, and it just slowly diminished, and then the son of the guy that owned Bonds came into the shop and said, "Are you interested in doing a club night at Bonds?" And this would have been August 1993, I think. And said, "Let's go down and have a look." But obviously, we've done that event. Let's go and see what it's like, and what's the sound system like? The normal things that you would want to ensure were up to standard for a weekly club event. And August 93, we started Moneypennies, which was essentially an extension of the values that we created from Chuff Chuff, repackaged, renamed, and the name quite obviously was the association with Bonds, Miss Moneypennies. That's how the name came about. And I suppose because we had not a particularly good experience at the Q Club, we didn't really see Moneypennies having any longevity whatsoever. We thought, yeah, let's give it a go and let's see what happens. And there was no preconceived ideas. There was no plans whether it would have any longevity at all. We just thought, let's give it a go. And what you've got to bear in mind, coincidentally, we were still running the shop. I was DJing, so we had a lot of things going on in our lives, and so it was, and plus, the Chuff Chuff event. So it was not. Was it perceived that it was going to be the success that it became? Definitely not. That was probably. I remember New Year's Eve. Every New Year's Eve, we ran Moneypennies for 13 years every Saturday in Birmingham, and every New Year's Eve, I'd scratch my head and think, how long more is this going to last for? You just couldn't really think that a club night would have such would connect so vigorously with people, and again, I suppose because where it was not in the city centre. It was just on the outsides of the city centre. It was probably near a place called Newtown, which was quite a dodgy area in Birmingham, and and people from all over the country and the world as the years went on visited this little site.
Well, let me tell you why, and I know why, because I remember DJ Magazine centerfold section. Bam! You open it up, and there you see these beautiful women in the pictures. They always knew Music Magazine, Mix Mag. They knew how to shoot you guys to the point where it exploded internationally. And then, of course, all the guests that you had play alongside you.
Well, we had everybody playing for us. It was really kind of interesting because, initially there was it was very much focused on UK DJs when it first came about. And there was, I suppose there was a selection. There was Graham Parks, there was Paul Oakenfold, there was Danny, there was Mark Moore used to play for us regularly, John of the Pleased Women, Lisa Loud, Smoking Joe. So there was, a real, and I could go on, there was a real collection. Tony DeVitt, I can't forget Tony DeVitt because we managed him as well for a while. And so, there was there was a core of DJs, including myself in that were just doing the circuit around the UK. And we, it was, and I suppose a lot of the clubs were very much playing the same soundtrack. There wasn't a lot of music being produced in those days, so the music quite often would be repeated throughout the night, and it wasn't until a little bit later that we established ourselves essentially because number one, we had a diverse audience, again predominantly because it was Birmingham based, so it was Asian, white, black, gay, straight, very female friendly. So that was a real selling point for us. And secondly, we focused because again, our experience as a result of going abroad and experienced a lot of clubs in various locations internationally, we knew that the key for a good night out wasn't music. Obviously was incredibly important, but there had to be a visual element as well. So we had a production team that were addressing the club on a weekly basis, and also the dancers, the drag, the other elements that ensured that there was just more to a club than just simply going to listen to a soundtrack. There was a visual experience that was going, and that gave us our notoriety. I think that gave us our unique selling point at that time, and that became as much of a focus to us as the music.
So the components that you are providing are great music, fantastic talent, the visual, the beautiful crowd, gay, straight, all the above, multiracial. Hello, are we still on? Are we still there? Okay. Multiracial, the whole thing. You're bringing a ton of components, and it's working. And it's working very well because you had the right place and the right thing to do it as well.
Yeah, and I think in addition to that, because it was getting such notoriety through the various magazines and what have you, we also attracted quite a celebrity-based audience as well. So there was who was coming regularly. Robbie Williams, Pet Shop Boys, Heather Small would be there on her own dancing next to the DJ booth. I remember one occasion I was DJing there and Robbie Williams stumbles into the booth and says, "Oh, is it all right if I get on the lighting, get on the lights and do the lighting job?" I said, "You carry away." Lots of sports people. I mean, it was a real. And I suppose because we were living the experience, it to a certain extent went over our heads. It became normal. It became normalized that these so-and-so's coming down tonight. Will you make sure this person's looked after? Kind of didn't really register until possibly later on in life when you're not doing as much. But you just think, good Lord, this was Birmingham. This was an industrial city that was essentially quite often forgotten about, and we were attracting, I suppose, in many respects, to a certain extent, we were the Studio 54 of the dance world in the UK at the time. And that's a big statement to make, I think, but nevertheless, I think we were.
Exactly. I mean, when you really look at the picture, you had an industrial city, like you said, and you're bringing this house sound, and it's working. And it's not working with just a few hundred people, 2,000 a weekend.
Sorry, I lost you then, Lenny.
What I was saying was, I hope you can hear me. I was
Sorry, Lenny, I lost you again. Your
weather may be getting really bad because we have it now. So you may be seeing some not so good weather right now. The internet's kind of messing up somewhat. Let's see, did he remove? Bring him back. I think we're having a little bit of an issue right now, guys. Let's see if we can bring him back. Are we okay now, Mr. Brian?
Yeah, good, all good.
What I was saying was, you're in an industrial city playing soulful mixed with vocals and black R&B dance, you would say, with the English side of it, okay? And it's working. All the components are working for you. When does it stop working the way you want it? You know, where does it come to a point where it's been going so good that as good as things are, you get those moments like with the roller coaster, it drops down. When is that you start to see a change?
I think we were very fortunate in the sense that because it was a stepping stone, because each stage, the club, which became the showcase, I suppose, for all the other endeavours that evolved as a result of that week to week club. But we, as a result of that going, we got interest from sponsors. So we had sponsorship money being thrown at us. We also started releasing albums, which is quite an interesting story that came from that as well. So we had a record, started signing music. We then obviously it became, not long after we started becoming a touring concept as well. So we were bringing the Moneypennies experience to other clubs around the UK. Ibiza came about in '96, and that opened the world to the Moneypennies ideals. So in terms of, it became more than just simply a club. So we became too busy just to simply, the club role, because we had a template, we knew what we needed to do. We needed to keep that interesting. And also as the years sort of developed, musically, we became a much more mature outfit as well, in the sense that we wanted a soundtrack that resembled or categorized what Moneypennies was. So as I said early on, the music was, I suppose, fundamentally fairly standard, what everybody was playing. And yes, you know, I suppose Moneypennies was at the time very much a more vocal soundtrack, but nevertheless, most of the DJs, particularly the club DJs, were playing a very, very similar soundtrack, particularly if it was under the house banner. And the involvement, I suppose, musically came when we started putting the albums out. And so that, again, as I said, each step from touring to album releases to single signing to Ibiza to the world to sponsorship, it became quite a big juggernaut in terms of a business model.
Did you release the first compilation album, or did somebody else do the actual release part of it?
Well, what you mean through through a label? So the first release that we did, and I mean it was it was throwing ourselves deeply into the unknown. The first release we did was with an organisation called Total BMG, who were a distribution and marketing company. And there was myself, Tony DeVitt, and Mark Moore on the first album. And we put together the visual for the front, which was essentially one of the drag. Well, he wouldn't describe himself as a drag, but he was loosely drag, and a couple of models that used to come to the club sort of surrounding him on a big throne sort of thing. And we allowed the DJs to ascend. We didn't follow the route that was the commercial route that a lot of the other brands were. We actually gave the DJs the freedom to choose their own music for their mixes, and as a result of that, I think that allowed us then to develop our sound. But in response, so Total BMG tucked us up in a right deal, to be honest with you. You know, we ended up putting the concept together. They put us, I mean, we were totally naive. We didn't really know what we were doing in terms of signing a record deal. We thought, great, we're putting a compilation out. Let's have a little bit of this. But what we learned was, I think we were in the, you know, we sold 60,000 plus albums, and we ended up owing them money. So it was an interesting. It was a baptism of fire, shall we say? But we learned as a result of that. The second deal that we worked with was with KTEL. Now, we had a choice between Sony and KTEL. With Sony, they were offering us an advance royalty deal, whereas with KTEL, the offer that was placed was they paid us a consultancy fee. The deal was 4 albums a year, of which there was, I think, if I remember correctly, £100,000 marketing on each album. So we went with the smaller entity, but within that framework, we were very much involved in the licensing, in the business side of it. So consequently, kind of learned the business of music as a result of that deal, as well as quite a decent deal with them. So I think we did about 6 albums with those guys, and also as a result of working with them, we started our first singles label as well. So it was a nice opportunity to learn the business of a music business, alongside getting the opportunity to be paid for the pleasure, and releasing a decent catalogue of compilations.
So besides running the club, now you're also doing the record business now, because you said you were baptized by fire. And you hear this, everyone? First album sold 60,000 units, right? Imagine doing that now. But check this out. I'm going to ask him the question. How do you juggle everything? Because there's a lot going on.
Well, we became a business, essentially. You know, we were employing people. We had within the office, we had a little DJ agency. We had a touring agency that were looking after that side of things. We were evolving as the music side of things was evolving. The club, the tour, you know, so there was a lot going on. So we had as well as, there was 4 of us. So there was myself, my brother Mick, Dermot, another brother, and Lee Garrick. So there was 4 of us that were kind of doing our separate roles. So I was obviously more involved in the music side of things. Mick was the businessman. Dermot was the marketeer. Lee was the guy that was out on doing the promotion. So he was doing more of the sort of networking, shall we say. And then each little department had their own little small team of people that were doing their little bits to contribute. And then there was one really good person in the office that was kind of keeping control of us all. So it was Yes, it was quite an enterprising little situation for many years.
Do you miss all that way of working, like the way we all used to work with the analog business? Do you miss the whole speed of it and everything goes to what we are doing today?
Well, I mean, in addition to that, the shop evolved into a record shop. So, we were supplying a lot of the DJs house music and different house music. We had a UK garage department, UK garage and drum and bass department, and obviously the tickets and the tapes were running alongside that as well. So I think, and I mean, it's similar with the fashion thing. You know, there was a network of people. You got to know a lot of people. It seems to me now it's a lot more insular. You kind of, everything is. It's less tangible, you know. I've recently sort of put my toe back into the water in the music business, and I speak to our distributor, but you don't meet people. I mean, I've yet to kind of step out and start doing the Amsterdam and Miami again, but. That was great. It was a great community of people, and that gave you the drive and the dynamics to continue. And the people that you met were, and the new experiences that you had as a result of going to Miami and going to clubs over there and hearing different people play. And obviously, that would influence your mindset in terms of how you would want the sort of music that you would be of interest to you in the clubs. So it was great. It was really hands-on, and we were traveling a lot and doing Ibiza and doing everything everything that was alongside it. So it was a very I don't know whether I'd have the energy to do it personally now, all those sort of things, but yes, it was incredibly exciting and incredible in the sense of the people that you met and the community of people that were around you that were all of a similar mindset.
Jim, what was the hardest part for you? Is this, there's always that, for some producers, it's that hit record. For some, it's the greatest events of all time. What was the apex peak for this for you?
I would say, I mean, this is really off the wall. It doesn't, and we had all those experiences. I signed a top 10 hit. I remixed lots of big named artists in the early 2000s. But I would say the best experience I had as a result of this was we put a candidate up in the 1997 general election. And it was essentially a PR campaign for the first album that we released, which was called Glamorous One. And I think I described to you the character that was part of the visual for that album, the artwork for that album. And it was and I kind of loosely described him as a drag artist, which has kind of been a little bit unfair. He described himself, and I remember him saying this clearly, I'm not a drag artist. I'm a human freak. That's how he described himself. And I mean, his book was just outstanding. And we first bumped into this guy in Ibiza. We were doing Moneypennies, and we were just having a drink around Ibiza town. And this guy walked around the corner, and he was in platform shoes that were probably about, I don't know, maybe about a foot and a half, and his outfit was just, good Lord, where did this fella come from, or where did this person come from? I mean, it was an incredible visual. So straight away we took his details, and he was known as the Transformer, and he became the weekly door person. Weekly, he would be in the club. He'd kind of make his presence felt, and he would always make. People would be just flabbergasted. So, going back to the election, we decided, or I decided, that we would put a candidate up in the 1997 election, and this character was the candidate. And we chose this area, and I mean, if there's English people listening to this, they may remember this 97 election. The 97 election was incredibly important because it was something like, I don't know, maybe 14 years of Conservative rule in the UK, of which maybe 11 or 12 of those were Thatcher, the Thatcher era. So it felt quite a repressed time in England at the time, or Britain at the time. And there was one constituency in the UK, which was Tatton, and Tatton was a constituency that had a character and a member of Parliament, a Conservative member of Parliament called Neil Hamilton. Now, Neil Hamilton was possibly one of the reasons why the Tory government at the time were getting a lot of negative press, because it was found out that he was receiving cash, brown paper bags of cash from the owner of the what's the shop called? The owner of, what's the big swanky shop in London? Oh God, gosh, anyway. So he was receiving cash from this character. Al Fayed was the owner. Harrods, that's the one. Harrods, thank you. And he was receiving cash from Al Fayed to lobby Parliament. This became mainstream news, and his seat, as a consequence, became the highest profile constituency of this general election. I had a friend that lived in this area, and I said to him, we want to put this candidate up. It's a PR stunt, and we want to put this candidate up. Showed him the visual of the candidate. I said, you had to get 10 people to ratify your candidate. And he managed to get all his neighbours to sign this our candidate, of which we called Miss Moneypenny, the Transformer. And as it happens in this constituency, the main parties pulled away because there was this war correspondent called Martin, the man with the white suit, Martin. Anyway, this guy was going up against. So it was the man in the white suit, the war correspondent, no association with any political party, and Neil Hamilton. So it was essentially good versus evil. So we decided to, as a result of my friend who lived in Tatton, or just outside Tatton, getting the 10 people that could ratify our character, our potential MP, to sign him off. So we went through 3 weeks of campaigning up in this area, and I mean, it was one of the most uplifting, weird experience, because we kind of got into the politic of it then. It was, it no longer became a PR stunt, even though it was essentially a PR stunt. And we, because of the nature and the visual nature of this character, the press that if we'd have paid for the press for this, it would have cost, I don't know, millions. We had front page press with all the most of the tabloids, numerous broadsheets. So the Guardian, I think, did a front, and we had NBC News following us. The Sky News on the first day that we brought the candidate up. So it was just a phenomenal campaign, and it was all kind of done on the hoof. We didn't plan anything. Other than the fact that we knew when people saw this character, they were going to go, "Wow, what the hell is this?" So it was, and so I think as an experience, actually sort of tapping into the elite of the British political system, that was probably the most exciting situation that I got involved in as a result of the Moneypennies, the club situation. So, I think it far outreached, remixing or releasing singles or I mean, up to a point. I mean, I think, you know, DJing experiences are second to none. And I suppose there's a story that I can add to that. But I think it's just an individual thing that you would have never in a million years found yourself involved in. To have experienced something like that as a result of a little club in the backwater of Birmingham, you just would never in a million years think that was going to happen. Something like that would happen. So I think, yes, that was an experience and a half.
How close did he how close did he have a chance of even winning this?
Oh, no chance whatsoever. You know, not a cat in hell's chance. but the visual itself, you know, was you know, it was going to make a mark. You know, people were going to turn around and think, what on earth is this? Oh, this is a candidate for you know, it totally made a mockery of the electoral system up there, because we were invited because of the nature of the way that it works in the UK, and I don't know whether it's similar in America, is that you have what's called the Representation of Peoples Act. So every candidate that's on a ticket has got a right to have a voice. So for interviews, so if there was debates that were, and I mean, a kind of a really interesting situation. We have a political show in the UK that's run for years, which is called Newsnight, and the producer of Newsnight, it was Fax at the time, faxed us and said, would you take away your right so that we can have an interview with Martin Bell was the man in the white suit, sorry, the war correspondent, and Neil Hamilton on Newsnight. And hang on a minute, little click came up, said, absolutely not. We want to be in this interview. Not a chance in hell are we pulling our rights away. So this fax came backwards and forwards. One of the characters who actually presents the show phoned us up and said, no, you've got to do something. So we listed a list of 12 questions that they had to ask on the show so that we would pull our rights from appearing on it. And every question had something like Miss Moneypennies suggests this, that, and the other. So name check Miss Moneypennies throughout the questions that we sent in their direction. So yes, it was. I mean, like I said, we kind of nearly touched the way that power operates in this country.
I mean, talk about making even Moneypennies more famous now because of it. And also, you know, you had a free press machine on a whole different level, not just the DJ trade mags, but now you have political genre stuff going on, mixing in with your nightly type of weekends, you know?
No, totally. I mean, it was bizarre, you know, and as I said, you became totally absurd, because I was kind of pushing that project. You know, it was a bit of a blip of an idea, and it was me and a friend of mine that were kind of pushing this project, and we just got totally into it. You know, we hired a girl to produce a documentary, so we were being followed by cameras throughout this. So there is a documentary on YouTube somewhere, and we didn't manage to. What the plan was to try and sell the documentary. We kind of left it a little bit late to a UK, but I think there was something like, and I still have this footage somewhere, something like I don't know, maybe 36 hours of footage that were produced as a result of this campaign that we were doing up in Tatton. So it was quite an interesting situation that we found ourselves in.
You know, this is all before Glitterbox, everybody. This is all before any of that stuff that happened. This is during the era of Cream was going on, Moneypennies, Ministry Nights, Ministry of Sound. So, you know, they're writing the story pre to nothing else like it before. That's what makes it. I never knew about this election thing. This blew me away just now, Jim. That really blew me away.
Yeah, it was like I said, and I suppose the ironic thing is that, you know, you never really, as a result of couple of guys opening a clothes shop that evolved into a DJ career and evolved into a club night. You would have never dreamed in a million years, as you know, when we were young boys or young men coming up with these kernels of ideas of what should we do with our lives. You never thought in a million years that this was going to happen.
No, you were going to be rock stars. That was the initial part.
Oh well, that was the thing. I think that was always the kind of the dream, maybe that there was.
We're going to follow Led Zeppelin. We're going to follow the Beatles. We're going to be the next, the Ryans.
Yeah, indeed, yeah.
But you got to give us now. I mean, we know the high part, and we hear of all the accomplishments. What makes you pull back and stop doing it? What changed?
I would say, I mean, it was quite clear when we stopped doing Miss Moneypennies in Birmingham, the weekly club night, and you know, we kind of evolved not only as promoters, we ended up owning that club as well. So we became club owners as well as that. And I think that becoming, I suppose, liquor sellers rather than creatives, that took a little bit of the shine out of the business model, if you like. And I say that very loosely, you know, having the stress of running bar staffs, having people managing it, having to try to get an event in there on a 7-day-a-week basis rather than just one night a week that became the Moneypennies. That certainly changed the dynamic of the business. And then I think we eventually sold the club and stopped doing Moneypennies on a regular basis, and that kind of lost the momentum then and lost the dynamic of the people that were working on it on a day-to-day basis. And eventually, and I think with me and my brother, we worked together for, I don't know, maybe 25 years, maybe 20 plus years anyway, from early 80s up until 2007 or 8. So we kind of, you know, life change, you get married, you've got kids, and we, I suppose, I mean, we never, there was no animosity there, but I think we just needed to break free a little bit from that scenario. And I think, you know, the club not happening on a week-to-week basis certainly allowed that to happen.
Did that lead you to keep going on as an international DJ? And I'm not going to say international DJ, I'm going to say the James Bond of our industry.
I mean, I was very fortunate because, you know, my DJing career fundamentally was interlinked with the Moneypennies and Chuff situation. You know, it allowed me not only to become recognised in my own right as a DJ, but, you know, a lot of the gigs that I was doing was, as I mentioned before, were associated with the Miss Moneypennies situation because we were touring it. We were doing Ibiza, we were doing the Mediterranean, Tenerife, Mallorca, Napa, all these sort of places around on summer by summer for years on end. So, you know, so it gave me, it certainly, well, it was more than a platform for me as a DJ and allowed me to sort of explore the music side of things as a result of the licensing, compilations, and doing production work as well. So, you know, it gave me an opportunity to sort of open that interest that I possibly got into the scene in the first place for, because if you remember the initial conversation, the guy that I met at the university that I played that kind of taught me how to play the bass guitar was, you know, that was where my passion came about. But, you know, it was never, I suppose, from working in that environment, I never fully focused on DJing. I did DJ, and I was relatively successful as a result of it, but, you know, it didn't, you know, I think if there's a slight blip of a regret, and I dare say my DJ career would have never happened if it hadn't been for Moneypennies and Chuff. It would have been focus totally on the DJing side of things, which I suppose, since the Moneypennies situation is not as well, certainly not as active as we were. You know, it's allowed me to become a little bit more focused on the DJing side of things and put things into place that that has allowed me to. I wouldn't say, I mean, the development occurred a long time ago, but to become a little bit more focused on a sound, maybe a freedom, because Moneypennies, even though it was, we created our own sound to a certain extent. Again, it on an individual basis, at times you felt that you couldn't completely allow yourself. You were in the threads of the Moneypennies scenario rather than the individual DJ. So to a certain extent, you had to, well, and it was my own creation to a certain extent, but you had to kind of follow a template that was associated with the Miss Moneypennies brand, which was fine. I had no problems with that, but that was kind of in the forefront of your focus, rather than thinking, if you had been an individual DJ, would it have been slightly different in terms of how you would have gone about your musical journey?
Right. And that's why I asked that question, because, you know, things change because of circumstances, and you had a brand that needed to be met because you had different people there. Saying that, there's no retirement in place for you, right? You're still strong and active now.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, the Moneypennies label has regenerated itself as a result of a track that I signed from a young producer about 6 months ago, and we've recently released it. A young fella called Melak, Get Down. It's a lovely little funky number, and I'm just hoping that, you know, what I would like to see, because I think, because Moneypennies was such a showcase, and we, as DJs, I probably get more music sent to me now than I did, you know, and we used to always obviously get lots of music sent to us, but we're inundated with music. You know, there isn't a day that goes by that 20, 30 pieces of music are emailed through. And, you know, I certainly haven't got the time to listen to everything. I'll pick and choose and maybe have a day a week whereby I'll go through tunes. But there's a lot of talent and there's a lot of brilliant house music being produced. And I would say equally as, if not more so than ever before. And there's a little bit of I feel a little bit regretful because that music isn't being showcased in the way that it was 10, 15, 20 years ago, where there was so many clubs that were playing a soundtrack of that nature. You know, and it just seems to me that, you know, there's quality music being produced, and young producers out there that would like to take the next step. And I suppose because, you know, there's a nurturing part of me that would like to be able to develop something under the Moneypennies music banner which has got a legacy, obviously, and has got a legacy within the house music forum, to give young up-and-coming producers an opportunity to be able to develop their skill. And, you know, who knows? I've got no plans with how Moneypennies, other than the possibility of maybe one party next year, and that's got, because it's Moneypennies' 30th birthday next year. So there's a possibility. I'm in discussions with various venues. So this may or may not come off. I don't know as yet. I've got two little projects. Well, I've got three projects, but two projects that are focused possibly to do with the 30th birthday. A Miss Moneypennies Gospel House Choir, which I'm in discussions with somebody at the moment. A little gospel choir that worked for me in the orchestra show that I did a couple of years ago. And I'm in discussions with an incredible venue in Birmingham. Now, if I can pull that off, I will do another Moneypennies 30th birthday. If it doesn't, I won't. But who knows? You know, I mean, Moneypennies, as I said before, I used to scratch my head on New Year's Eve every year and think, well, you know, another year. This is this is unbelievable. So, you know, there's experience there, and there's an understanding of how to put an event on, and what type of soundtrack will be applicable to the audience that ideally would like to come to it. So, and I think, you know, the scene is in real need for new house music producers of a younger age group. And you know, if there is part of me that would like to be still involved in it, is to find that young talent and regenerate that interest to a certain extent that we all lived to the full for many years, which was great fun.
And we're still not stopping the living.
No, totally not. No.
First of all, let's just say this. Congratulations on the 29 years of Miss Moneypennies. Congratulations on the new release coming. Who was the producer again?
It's a guy called Melak.
Melak, everybody. Find him.
Yeah.
Are you getting itchy?
Sorry, Lenny.
I said, are you getting itchy to start making records?
Well, ironically, I did my first remix for probably, it's probably 5-6 years this year. An old friend of mine, a French guy who is deeply involved in the music industry, phoned me up and said, would you like to do a remix by an artist called Joanna St. Pierre, Don't Stop the Music? And I thought, do I really want to be doing this? And I just thought, sod it, let's have a go. And the remix is getting lots of play. I mean, it's okay, it's on a very underground basis, but it's been trickling along for probably 3, 4, 5 months now. And again, who knows? And I'm as a result of that, I probably, I'm tentatively thinking about maybe doing a track of my own. I've got a few ideas that could possibly be exploited. So let's see. I'm not saying anything at this stage, but yeah. So it was great being back in the studio. It was great having a track that had got some recognition. I just did it as a bit of a favour for my old friend Nicholas Bullistan. I didn't really expect anything other than, I was grateful that he was putting it on the release. But it's, as I said, it's slowly getting a little bit of notoriety.
Did you feel rusty when you went back in?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say that I use Ableton. I can use Logic a bit, but I tended to move more towards Ableton as the years have gone on. I'm not an engineer, so I do work with somebody, and I always felt a little bit unsure of myself when I first went into the studio. But I think, once you've got a clear picture of something that you want, and listening to that track, I kind of wanted to recreate a sound to a certain extent that I was producing maybe 20 years ago. So there was elements, obviously a bass line has always been important to me because I play the bass. So there was, there was a vision for what I wanted to have in that track. And I think if I go in totally cold, I'm useless. But if I go in with a sort of an idea and I want to sort of see that idea through, I can work up with it. But I'm never 100% sure of myself. I don't go in there overconfident thinking that I'm going to create the greatest track ever written. It's always sort of feeling a bit tentative about it and whether I'm a bit unsure of myself. Sure. So yeah.
I'm going to give you this last question because you covered a lot. With all the successes and all the wonderful parts, do you have any regrets to anything that went on?
No, absolutely not. I think, I count myself incredibly lucky that I found myself in a situation that was never really planned and evolved into something that became.
Wait, you're sorry you didn't become a priest after experiencing the life you lived?
No, well, yeah, the Catholic Church, as I said, is probably. I'm glad I didn't become a priest. Definitely not. Yeah, I've got absolutely no regrets. I think, as I said, I count myself incredibly lucky, and I could probably talk to you for another 5-6 hours recording, because these memories are just starting to churn around my head of other situations that arose that could potentially be of interest. So yeah, it's I'll never be short of a story to tell somebody in the pub, put it that way.
As long as you've been doing this, as long as we all have, trust me, you have amazing and long stories. As everybody has learned with me at this show, this has been a forum to bring out things like I said, we never knew you were going to be a priest, no less ever saw this become a career. And that's what when you speak to others, our peers, you hear the same. Started out as something fun, and then it became a business. And you guys created a business model. You had the clubbing events, you had the DJ agency, and you also even took care of Tony DeVitt.
Yeah. And we also signed, sorry to interrupt you, we also signed Tom Nova Your Body. Do you remember that track? So we brought that into the UK. I signed it from Germany as a result of one of our resident DJs bringing a promo into the office and saying, Jim, have a listen to this. Ken Fan, who's now Cafe Del Mar main resident, and thought, bloody hell, this is a fantastic record. And again, it's just really weird how accidents happen. Right place at the right time, a little bit of good fortune, and obviously found out who was working the record in Germany. Phoned them up, did an incredible deal with them. It was we picked the record up for next to nothing, and the week I signed it, the record was played, and not by my doing. Maybe other people would probably put their hands up and that, we worked this record. It was still, the ink was still drying on the deal with the German label that was original that we signed it from. The week that we signed it, Pete Tong played it on his Essential Mix show. I had every cat chasing me for that record.
Let me make sure everybody understands. Pete Tong plays the record. Boom.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was just, I had Simon from Defected, I had Ministry of Sound, I had Positiva, I had everybody chasing. And in the end, we did a deal with Ministry with this. And again, the record industry, you've got to dot your I's and cross the T's, particularly in those. The one stipulation that we had in that deal, I wanted it. I didn't want it signed. I didn't want it to be released through Data, which was the Ministry of Sound single label at the time. I said I wanted it to be branded Miss Moneypennies, and in the legals, that was all stipulated within the framework of the deal. Do you know how big the Miss Moneypennies branding was?
See what I just said to you? Did you have any regrets? Bingo.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was a learn. To me, it wasn't a regret, because it just made me learn that these buggers that work in this, you've got to be so fucking careful with them. Excuse my French, but honestly, you've got to be totally. And the only way you get wise to them is by situations that arise like that. Our branding was tiny; you could barely see it, and it would have launched, my vision for it was to launch the Moneypennies label on the back of this situation with Ministry of Sound, which is not an unreasonable ask. But
no, and that would have been the most sensible thing for it to jump off the what I call the implosion, the explosion to run with.
No, definitely. But like I said, I picked the record up for next to nothing. Pete Tong played it without me doing anything about it. So there was a lot of positives about this situation. It was only when we got down to the nitty gritty of the business that you've got to have your wits. Well, we did we hired a lawyer, and we did all the right things, but it didn't quite work out in the way that we wanted it to work out.
Look, as we all say, you win some, you lose some. I mean, it was a win-win because there's really nothing financially that you really got into, but it would have been a win-win in a big way if Moneypennies would have gotten that thrust.
Well, I mean, on the other hand, as I said, the from a financial position, we got a great advance from them. We continued getting royalties for 2 or 3 years, which were obviously shared with the artists. But it was, from a financial position, it was fantastic. But the vision from my point of view was I wanted to see Moneypennies on that sleeve in a big way, and that didn't quite work out. So I would say the majority of it was positive, but unfortunately the vision for the bigger picture didn't quite materialize.
Everyone keep watching Jim Chef Ryan. Some of us step in holes, right? This man steps in knee-high doo-doo and comes out smelling like roses every time.
Nearly every time.
We love this guy. He's talented, great DJ, is what I call an icon, a trendsetter, all the above. And 30 years of a brand is nothing to shake a stick at. That, to me, is what makes something iconic. It's called everlasting. So congratulations to Mr. Ryan and his family, because I know his family was behind him in a very big way. As he said, his brother was there, and everybody else, that Jeff Jefferson's here. Everybody's here rooting you on still. They love what you do, and we all, appreciate you in a very big way. So don't stop, Mr. Ryan. On that note, everyone, thank you to True House Stories. I'll let Mr. Ryan say goodnight to you, and we will see you all next week.
Good night, and thank you for listening, and keep an eye out for the 30th birthday and for Melik Get Down. And one last thing, and Ibiza the musical, which is coming very soon as well. So lots of little projects on the go.
I'm so pretty.
Absolutely, yes. It'll be on.
Wait, he said he's got a Broadway production coming of Miss Moneypennies? Wait a minute. We're not letting you go for a sec. How did you leave that one out? Where is that going to be? What's the plan for that?
I trademarked the name. I mean, I've kind of mentioned earlier on to you about my daughters. Both of them are very deeply involved in theatre. One is just finishing her drama school, her MA at Central Drama School, and the other one's a theatre correspondent for The Guardian and The Independent. And our kind of family thing was musical theatre, and I had one of these moments when I think we were watching. We went to see We Will Rock You, and I thought, hang on a minute, there's a dance music opportunity here that has yet to be exploited. So I kind of curdled around a few ideas, and Ibiza the musical, I thought that is the name that will potentially ingratiate itself with the world of dance music, and hopefully possibly more beside. So the first action I did was trademark the name. This was before I thought, this is something that can't be, you know, if I'm thinking about it, there's a possibility somebody else will think about it. I wrote a script with a friend of mine, and we loosely based the script on the Tempest. So I'm using my sort of literary background, and it's essentially, I mean, it has got authenticity because it's essentially a working around the experience, or one night experience that I had in Ibiza, which was we did a closing party in 9/11, and it's kind of, that's an incident in there, but it's, the narrative is driven by that situation. I'm in the process of working with a theatre in Birmingham, the Rep, at the moment. So we're talking to directors at the moment, and who knows? I'm reasonably confident that, you know, after maybe, and this has been a project that's been on the go for maybe, I'd say I finished writing the script maybe 7 or 8 years ago. So it's been trying to find a route into that theatre world, which is, you know, it's again, you know, I'm a man from the club scene, the dance scene. I'm a DJ, so, you know, they don't look upon people of my nature too favourably. So to try to knock those doors down has been a very, very slow process, but we're getting there. So we will see. And what's even more ironic, I found footage from that particular event in Ibiza. I told you I used to carry a camera around with me, so I found footage. So there's an extension to this idea that can go a little bit further than just simply the musical. So we will see. Still trying to maintain that vision.
He's got movies. Hollywood's calling.
Right.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning into True House Stories. Thank you, Jim Chef Ryan. Good night, everyone. Take care. Stay with us, Jim.